I'm going to just real quick say that I hit the wrong button. This is a real quick one. Um, we're talking about people who are migrating, right? And the people that are wealthy and move, but not everyone is that way. And I'm going to ask that you watch this supplemental video on people who migrate to work in the Persian Gulf, in the United Arab Emirates, and in Dubai. Migrants. They're both migrants, but these migrants lead lives a little better than slaves. And that is unfortunately an all too common experience. We also have many expatriate communities. So Chicago has a large population of people from Mexico, right? We have a large Chinese population. And these definitely affect the city. We are in one of what they call the gateway cities. Immigration tends to generally have immigrants land in a big city. It's where the jobs are, it's where the money is, it's why people come to the large cities. Over time, they may move out to the rural areas. But large gateway cities like Chicago or New York or London or Paris, right? You have these large amounts of foreign-born population. So Chicago has a lot of people who were not born in the United States here, more so than the rest of the state. Okay, we have large expatriate communities, and so in these cities we have a lot of different minorities. We have diaspora communities, which you're going to kind of read about in the discussion groups. The Rohingya, who kind of had to flee. People who are diaspora communities migrated, usually forced migration. We have hybrid identities, African American, Asian American, um, Asian African. You can actually pick almost anything on the U.S. Census for a race. So that kind of goes back to the idea of race being a construct, doesn't it? We do have models of population movement. People try to predict it. This right here, Ravenstein's, I'm not going to go through this. It's for you to look at. We're not going to cover it too much on the quiz. But the one I do want to talk about, which I think makes the most sense, is Lee's model, the push-pull model, right? So what causes people to move and in what numbers? Okay. Well, first of all, there's a lot of factors. There's things from where they are that are pushing them. Something's pushing people to leave. Conversely, there's something that's pulling them to a destination. So why do they go here? Why do they go from the green dot to the yellow dot? Why not this way? Something pushed them, something pulled them. In between, there are obstacles, maybe things that make them stop along the way. But this model really explains the Great Migration. In the United States, up until the 1920s, almost all African Americans still lived in the former Confederate lands of the South. So Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, Kentucky, the areas that were former slave states. That was where most African Americans lived. Today, most African Americans live in cities like Chicago, Philadelphia, New York, Los Angeles. They live in large urban cities. And the Great Migration happens to cause this. In the 1930s, African Americans moved north looking for better work. They were tired of being sharecroppers in the South. There was a lot of discrimination, a lot of segregation, and the idea was that they would find work in the factories of the North where maybe there was a better life. Okay, so the push here from the origin was the discrimination of the South, a lack of economic opportunity. African Americans were only allowed to be poor farmers. The destination, northern cities, the pull was increased potential economic activities and freedom. The obstacles. It's hard. It's hard to move, especially when you have no money, right? But what was one of the other pulls about this? Family. So in the 1920s, there was a small African American population in Chicago that had come up from Mississippi, and they had some of the first jobs in the area, and they sent letters home to their friends and to their family, and they called them and they said, "There's work here in the factories." So a lot of people from those areas of Mississippi came up here. Chain migration. You had the first person living here, the cousin, the father, the brother, and the sister and the mother and the cousin came up. All right. If I get my cursor to work, we are at the end. This was a pretty long chapter. Again, can't stress enough. Can be controversial. Take everything and kind of think about it. If you have any questions, please feel free to send me an email or jot them down and we can talk about it in the next virtual class. But other than that, that's all I got for you. Bye-bye.